too much here. Okay, now I think I got it. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for today's presentation of our Senior Security Asset Protection Series. And today we're here to talk about how retirement planning and long-term care planning impacts your public benefits. My name is Nia Murray. I am the Programs Coordinator with Neighborhood Recovery Community Development Corporation, and we are one of many nonprofit organizations that are in the Houston area. But for our organization, we actually have an entire series related to information, particularly for our seniors, as it relates to retirement planning. And, what do you need to do? How do you get started? What is it that you need to kind of think about as it relates to when it's time for you to retire? How does it that you protect your assets for your heirs moving forward in the event of your capacity? What happens? So there's an entire series related to the senior security series. So, but today's presentation, we're going to have an expert in the field of elder law, Ms. Elizabeth Camp with the law offices of Elizabeth Camp, to provide information for you all as it relates to um, the legal ease or providing you with the legal services or the legal information relating to protecting your assets and establishing an estate plan and making sure that you don't become ineligible for different public benefits and how it actually works. And then later, we're going to get information from Ms. Sharice Hurst, who is joining us with the ECHO Consulting, who's going to be providing you guys with information about the planning of public benefits and applying and what that process is like and what does that actually mean. So I know that a lot of this can be very confusing. It could be very cumbersome and very frustrating for a lot of seniors or even people that are not so much seniors as it relates to trying to prepare for this. What is it that you need to know? What is it you need to do? How do you even get started? And for somebody who's not ready to retire, but maybe retiring in the near future, what do they need to know? How do they get started? What is it, that they need to be thinking about long term so that way they don't um, inadvertently disqualify themselves for public benefits. So you never know when you may be able to may be in need of public benefits like Medicare, Medicaid, and nursing home care. Um, what does that mean? What does it look like? Everybody's situation is not the same. Um, so this is an opportunity for you all to ask questions of our experts that we do have here. You can either raise your hand or unmute yourself at the end of the presentation. You can feel free to type questions into the chat. We do encourage you to do that and be as engaging as you'd like. However, we do ask that you try to keep your questions to be as general as you possibly can so that you don't divulge any personal detail information as it relates to your personal situation, as we are recording the session as well as broadcasting on our social media platform on YouTube and on Facebook. So we want to try to protect your privacy as much as we possibly can and ask, and don't want your information kind of getting out there for everybody to have access to. However, again, we do encourage you to reach out to our experts like our presenters that we do have here today. That you can actually get more one-on-one information about your particular situation. So if you are joining us or just now joining us, again, please feel free to type your question into the chat, unmute yourself. If you are watching us on our social media platforms, feel free to type your question into the comment section, and I'll make sure that your question is asked at the end of the presentation as well. Also, I know that there were a couple of questions that were emailed to me in advance, so I will definitely read those at the end of the presentation as well. Let's see, what else is there? Oh, give the disclaimer, information that does get provided here is for educational purposes only. It is not to be considered legal advice or any kind of financial advice directly. So we, again, encourage you to reach out for your particular situation. So because this is a public platform, we wanted to make sure that everybody does know that. So with that being said, again, there's a lot of information that's going to be covered here today, and I'm pretty sure you guys are going to have some questions. So without further ado, we would like to go ahead and introduce our presenters. Ms. Sharice, we'll have you introduce yourself first, and then Ms. Elizabeth, you can introduce, and then we can move right on into your presentation.
Okay, hi guys. My name is Sharice Hurst, and I assist folks with long-term care long-term care crisis planning, especially, and then asset protection. So when folks find that they need some type of extended care, whether they're going to get that care at home or they're going to maybe need to get that care in a facility, then I assist you with ways that you can pay for that care and also ways that you can protect the assets that you have.
Okay, and I see we have Miss Joy McNair, who just joined us as well, who will be partnering with Miss Elizabeth Camp to provide the legal information for you guys. So, Miss Elizabeth, would you like to introduce yourself and Miss McNair?
Sure. My name's Elizabeth Camp, and I'm an elder law attorney here in Houston area. I have my own firm, and I'm also of counsel with McNair Law Group. Joy McNair is the owner of that law firm in League City. And Joy and I have been working together for a few years. Thank you for joining, Joy. I'm a native Houstonian. I've been practicing law for 30 years, and I've been practicing elder law for 11 years now. And thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Well, Ms. Lisa with the Texas Legal Services Center is one of our partners in a month of service collaboration that we have, and you came highly recommended by her. So she was like, she's an expert in elder law. She'd be perfect for this, and this is what she has a passion for. So, and that's what we want. We like people that have a passion for what it is that the information that we try to get out to the community. So, so we try to invite those folks to actually come and don't mind answering questions for people and assisting them and providing information. So we try to get as much information out to the community as we possibly can. We know that there are a lot of underserved people that are around the Houston and Harris County and surrounding areas that don't have access to a lot of information or don't know where to go for particular questions or resources and things like that. So that's what we want to do. We want to try to get as much of that information out to the public as possible. And without the assistance and the volunteering of you professionals, we would not be able to do what we do. So thank you guys very much. I'm thanking you well in advance of you even presenting here today. So thank you guys very much. So Miss Elizabeth, would you like to go ahead and move on into your presentation? And I'm going to for you. Okay.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. As I said, I'm Elizabeth Camp, and I'm an elder law attorney. And elder law is concerned with seniors, disabled, public benefits, and Social Security comes into that, as well as probate and guardianship. Can we have the next slide? Now, with elder law and public benefits, there are a lot of alternate facts out there, including putting your house in a revocable living trust, that it's fine to pay your relative for taking care of you at home, which with Texas Medicaid is not the case, and giving away $15,000, $16,000, $20,000 a year, the tax exclusion, that's fine to do too. Well, it's not. Next slide. And then there's stories about Medicaid estate recovery. If you get on Medicaid, they're going to take your house. If you have to go to a nursing home, you have to spend every dime you've got before you can be eligible. And that's just not true. Um, Giving all your money away to your kids is not a good way to qualify for Medicaid unless you are doing it in consultation with an elder law attorney who is providing you guidance. Next slide. So today we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about obviously planning for public benefits, which has a few moving parts to it. There's the financial review, legal documents that you need, trust planning, because sometimes you do want to use a trust. VA benefits, we'll touch on that briefly. We're going to talk about Medicaid and Medicaid estate recovery. Next slide. So first of all is to look at what you've got. So you need to look at your income. Are you retired? What retirement income do you have coming in? Do you have a pension? Do you have required minimum distributions coming in from an IRA? Do you have real estate other than just your homestead? Do you maybe have some part of a family mineral interest somewhere? What kind of insurance do you have? Life insurance? Do you have any annuities? What kind of annuities are they? And then what kind of bank accounts do you have? CDs? Where is your money and how do you put your hands on it? So you look at what you've got and then considering what are you going to need financially in order to take care of yourself and your spouse or in the future. So the average cost of a nursing home in Texas is about $242 a day, and that's for private care. That's private pay. What Medicaid does is it pays the difference between the cost of care and your income. So, in other words, Medicaid says, okay, your cost of care is $7,500 a month, but your income is $1,000. Fine, we'll let you keep $75 a month. You pay your insurance premiums, and we'll take the rest for the nursing home. So you have to look at your resources and determine, is Medicaid something you might need in the future? Keep in mind that not only is the cost of a nursing home high, but at-home care averages about $20,000 to $25,000 a month for 24/7 care. So when you see those commercials that say, Dad made us promise that we'd take care of mom at home, well, that's great because you're rich, but most people do not have an extra $25,000 a month to pay for 24/7 care at home. So some kind of facility is in the cards for the majority of us, whether it's private paying at a memory care facility or being on Medicaid in a nursing home. With the way that costs are, it's simply what's in the cards for the majority of us. So next slide. So once you've taken a look at your finances, excuse me, the next step in talking about estate planning when you're talking about public benefits is making sure that you have adequate legal documents. Number one, most important, is your statutory durable power of attorney. And this enables someone to handle your business for you if you are incapacitated or if you're just not able, if you are bedridden, you're perfectly able to talk on the phone, but you can't get out and about and you need someone to act as your legs. So that's another use of the durable power of attorney, is that it's good whether you're incapacitated or not. In Texas, certain powers have to be specifically given in a power of attorney, or else your agent will not have them. And those powers include the giving of gifts, either in general or in order to qualify for public benefits, self-dealing by the agent. And an example of self-dealing by your agent would be, say you're in a coma and you're going to be in a nursing home for the rest of your life because you're not ever going to wake up. And we need to do a ladybird deed on your home. And your agent under your power of attorney is your child. Well, some title companies will not allow them to sign because it's called what we call self-dealing. So we need to make sure that the power of attorney contains the actual self-dealing power that they're going to need. Another power that's specific in Texas that has to be specifically mentioned in the power of attorney document is the ability to create or revoke an irrevocable or revocable trust. And the reason that that language is so important in Texas is that if your income is over the cap for Medicaid, you're going to need something called a qualified income trust. And we'll talk about those in a little bit more detail later. But the only purpose of these trusts is just for people who are over the cap for Medicaid. And we'll talk about those later, like I said. So the next important thing to have is a will. And this is even if you structure everything so that no one's ever going to have to probate. A will is important so that we know in advance what your wishes were with regard to your property. So if you are incapacitated and we need to get you on Medicaid, we're going to look at your will to see what your intentions were with regard to your property. So that if we need to give things away in order to qualify you for Medicaid, we're going to make sure that we're giving them to the people that you would want to have them. And so that we are following your wishes. So a will, just to let people know in advance what you were thinking, is a good idea to have around. Of course, you'll need a medical power of attorney and a HIPAA authorization. And those are so that your loved one can authorize your medical treatment when you're at the doctor's office, and the HIPAA authorization so that they can see your medical records and discuss your medical treatment with your providers. Advance directives are extremely important. The other name for this is a living will. And what this is you are making your end of life decisions in advance so that your family doesn't have to. So that if something happens and you are hit by a bus, your family isn't having to make the decision about whether to keep you alive or not, because that's a very, very trying time. I have experienced that in more than one way. I was a hospital attorney for a long time, and that's really not a position you want to leave your loved ones in. Make your decisions in advance, have them documented in your advance directives, and you're good to go. No pun intended. The next document that's wise to have around is a designation of guardian. As a general rule, if you've got all your legal documents in place and they've got all the necessary power, it's a great way to avoid guardianship, because you don't want to have to go through that, because when you are under guardianship, you are stripped of your rights by the court. So it's not exactly a dignified thing, although it is necessary. If you have those legal documents in place, you can avoid it. But unfortunately, if you have dementia and there are behavioral issues, then it may be necessary to obtain guardianship of you in order to make sure you have the appropriate mental health treatment. And for that reason, we like to have a designation of guardian for you so that we know who you would prefer to be your guardian in case you need one. Something that's not used too often, but there is a declaration for mental health treatment. And if you or your loved one has a history of mental health issues and you tend to become incapacitated, The declaration for mental health treatment is a way to write down in advance what works for you. So, for instance, if you know that during a severe manic phase that the best medication that works for you is X, that goes in the document so that your healthcare providers and your family know in advance what the best way to treat you is. I also recommend transfer on death deeds or ladybird deeds. What these are deeds that you list a beneficiary in so that when you pass away, all that needs to be done is something called an affidavit of death is filed in the property records with the county clerk. There is no necessity for probate. This is really important, especially in the context of Medicaid estate recovery. While you can overcome Medicaid estate recovery in probate court, and I'll talk about that later, it's better just to avoid the problem in the first place by using transfer on death deeds and ladybird deeds. If there is no estate to probate, there is nothing for Medicaid estate recovery to claim against. Just keep that in mind. And finally, you can use a beneficiary designation for a motor vehicle. This is a form that's available from the state, excuse me, and is available online. So if you know who you would like to leave your car to or your RV, you can complete that form in advance and put it among your important papers. Next slide, please. Excuse me. So how can you plan for Medicaid? Is that something you can actually plan for in advance? To a certain extent, yes. So the basics for Medicaid planning are the solid, good legal documents that I just talked about. So that if you have those in place, then you've got all the bells and whistles that's going to be necessary for your agent to apply for Medicaid on your behalf. And using beneficiary designations on your bank accounts, if that's where the majority of your money is, and it's very simple and straightforward, that's something that you can do. Now, for other Medicaid planning, there is more advanced planning that you can do. There's the use of trusts. But specifically, we're talking about Medicaid Asset Protection Trust. And here's where I want to clarify again, when we're talking about advanced Medicaid planning and trusts, we're not talking about qualified income trusts or Miller trusts. Those have nothing to do with advanced Medicaid planning and only to do with your income being over the cap for Medicaid. Therefore, you have to run your money through a qualified income trust. So with trust planning, next slide, please. So I'm sure a lot of you would have heard about revocable living trusts, and a lot of estate planning attorneys will advise that you use these, and they are great for certain situations. They are not great for Medicaid. First problem is there's no asset protection in them at all. And the second problem is that if you have your house in there, while it is in the revocable living trust, it will count as a resource for Medicaid purposes. A homestead normally doesn't count, but if it's in a revocable living trust, it will count, and it has to be deeded out of the revocable living trust in order not to count. Any other assets that you have put in that revocable living trust will still count as assets for Medicaid purposes. In order to protect resources for Medicaid purposes, the first thing to remember is there's a 5-year look back period. So any money that you give away during that 5-year look back period, you are penalized by Medicaid. And the way that Medicaid penalizes you is essentially by dollar amount. So, and that dollar amount is 242 something. That's the penalty divisor. And that's the average cost of one day of nursing home care in the state of Texas. So if you give away $10,000, they will divide that by the penalty divisor. And the number that gives you is the number of days that you cannot be on Medicaid. The maximum penalty amount is a full 5 years. So we do use gift giving in order to qualify people for Medicaid, but it's really important that you're consulting with an attorney on doing that in order to make sure that there are enough resources in an appropriate place to private pay through that penalty period. So a nice consult with an elder law attorney is always a good idea. One thing that I think are very advisable to use for a Medicaid asset protection trust, if you have a cash lump sum, for instance, you just received $100,000 in an inheritance from someone, and you are 70 years old, you're in pretty good health. Yes, that's one of those times when I would say this is a good time to use a Medicaid asset protection trust, because we don't think you're going to need Medicaid in the next 5 years. That's a nice chunk of change, and it's worthwhile to protect in the Medicaid asset protection trust. If you've got family property, and for instance, you and your siblings each own a share, a Medicaid asset protection trust is a good idea in order to protect your share of that property. For one thing, it makes it not count after 5 years, so Medicaid won't count that as a resource. Second of all, it's also protected from Medicaid estate recovery. So there are a lot of uses for Medicaid asset protection trusts, just depending on your family situation. And there are also special needs trusts, and you may have heard of these, and these are normally for people who are under 65 and are disabled. But another part of planning for public benefits is that if you are married, it's a good idea for each spouse to have in their will a testamentary special needs trust, which says if my spouse is still living and they're disabled, then I want my stuff to go into a special needs trust for their benefit. After they die, then whoever else will inherit it. And the reason that we use these testamentary special needs trusts is they are not available to, a special needs trust is not available to people who are 65 and older. So if you are 66 and become disabled, you can't use a special needs trust. You have to be disabled prior to the age of 65. But you can insert one in your will and offer protection to a spouse or to other beneficiaries in your will. Next slide. All right, so Medicaid basics. It's a state and federal program that covers long-term care costs, among other things. There are a bunch of different programs, but we're specifically talking about the ones for seniors at this point. You have to be, and this is for nursing home and the waiver programs, you have to be a U.S. citizen or a legal resident. There are some qualifiers on the legal residence, so please speak to an attorney. You also must be a resident of the state of Texas. You need to be 65, blind, or disabled. If you are under 65, you can still get nursing home Medicaid. There's an extra hoop to jump through. Please see an estate planning, an elder law attorney if this comes up. But there is a way to do it, and it's not that much harder to do. It's just, like I said, an extra hoop to jump through if the person is under 65. It has to be medically necessary for you to be in a nursing home or to be receiving skilled nursing care at home. So that's an evaluation that is done by either the nursing home itself or if you are applying for Star Plus waiver for care at home, they will send someone out to the home to do the assessment. The asset limit for Medicaid, and this is countable resources, is $2,000. And that's at the end of every month. Medicaid looks at your assets at midnight at the end of the month. And then the income limit is 2829. And again, if your income is over 2829, then you have to use something called a qualified income trust. And that is what I like to call that is money laundering for the state of Texas. And what it is, it says to the state, and this is a legal trust document, it says, I know my income is over the cap for Medicaid. So every month, my income that's over the cap is going into this new qualified income trust bank account. And the only things I'm going to pay are my insurance premiums, my personal needs allowance of $75, and my nursing home. Anything else that is left stays in the account. And then when the person passes away, what's left in that qualified income trust account is paid to the state of Texas. It's the state's way of making sure that they get all of your income, whether you're over the cap or not. And then finally, we talked briefly about the Medicaid Estate Recovery Program. And what that is that's not a lien on your property or anything like that. The way it works is when you pass away, normally, unless you have structured things to avoid it, you will either have your will probated or an estate of some kind will be opened. And that is to administer your estate after you die. What Medicaid estate recovery does is it gives the state of Texas the right to file a claim in your estate after you die. And it's a prioritized claim. So it'll get paid before any distributions to beneficiaries. So remember, the estate has to be opened in order for them to file the claim. It's done by a private company, and they will only go after things that are worth $10,000 or more. And the one thing that most people have that's worth $10,000 or more is the homestead. So they can and will file a claim in the probate case. Now, those claims can be overcome. And that's actually something that we do at McNair Law Group. We have been overcoming MERP claims when someone did not have a ladybird deed or transfer on death deed. They passed away, and now we are clearing title to the homestead so the family can inherit. Of course, like I said, remember always a ladybird deed or a transfer on death deed is the best option. Although, like I said, we do help people when there is a potential MERP claim in the state. Next slide, please. So there are a couple other Medicaid programs that are important. And first of all is SLMB. And if you're a low income person, SLMB pays your Medicare Part B premium, which is very handy. That's about to go up to $185 a month, and that $185 a month can mean a lot to a lot of people. Now, QMB, and this is a program for people that includes SLMB, but is even lower income. And this program pays your Medicare premiums, deductibles, and your co-payments at the doctor's office for low-income beneficiaries. And then I spoke briefly about at-home Medicaid that provides up to 40 hours a week of care, but the average is about 35. Next slide, please. So Medicaid crisis planning. Nobody did anything, and now you've had a stroke and your spouse can't care for you at home, what do you do? Well, asset preservation is still possible, even if you didn't do a Medicaid asset protection trust 5 years ago. If somebody's single, an elder law attorney can help you preserve up to half of their remaining resources. For a married applicant, we can preserve up to everything for a married couple. And remember, for a married couple, the lower the income, the more assets that can be preserved. So I have seen and preserved over $1 million because their income was so low. We had a spouse, a wife who was much older than her husband. Her husband was so young, he wasn't even on Social Security yet and wasn't working. So we needed to preserve everything that we could so that he had something to live on, because he had another 30 years to live. So that's an important consideration is your income low enough so that you will be able to keep more stuff? And we'll talk about resource limits in just a moment. Keep in mind that when there's a married couple, the spouse who is at home, if they have lower income, if their income is below gross income, is below 3853.50 a month, then the spouse who's going in the nursing home will actually give them their spouse money, and it does reduce the amount that they pay to the nursing home. So that's very handy and helps take care of the spouse at home. Also, when there is a serious issue, we can use a qualified domestic relations order, a quadro, to increase and reduce shares of money from IRAs, etc. Next slide, please. I wanted to mention VA briefly. VA and Medicaid are kind of at odds when it comes to nursing home care. Where VA comes into play, where it's really useful, is for things like memory care and assisted living. Medicaid in Texas generally will not pay for memory care or assisted living. There are a few facilities that are grandfathered in, but literally just a few. The VA pension with aid and attendance is for wartime veterans only. So there's specific wartime periods that are listed, and you can find them easily online. They have a 3-year look back as opposed to a 5-year look back. A surviving spouse can get up to $14.78 a month, and these numbers are only good till the end of November, by the way. A single veteran can get up to $2,300, and a married vet up to $2,727. So if they need assistance with activities of daily living, then, and they need, and somebody is a wartime veteran and they need memory care or assisted living, VA pension may well be the way to go. But it is extremely important, again, to consult with an elder law attorney, because some features of the programs are at odds, and you'll need to be making a decision which one you are doing the planning for. Next slide. Medicaid state recovery. They're coming to take your house. No. So like I've preached repeatedly throughout this presentation, because I can't emphasize it enough. Get a transfer on death deed or a ladybird deed. It avoids probate, first of all. Second of all, avoids Medicaid estate recovery and just makes life so much easier for your heirs. And as I mentioned before, you can overcome a MERP claim in probate court, but you've got to have an attorney that knows what they're doing. Next slide. So here's the bonus. Again, the power of attorney. Y'all check your own. Check that, make sure you have the authority to create, fund, or terminate a trust. Look out to make sure it was executed properly and that it's notarized. Make sure you have successor agents listed, and make sure that you have gifting powers. And I might just repeat that. Thank you very much. You can leave that one up for a minute.
Righty here. Okay, so I've got my notes. I have all kinds of questions, but I'd rather. Oh, you know what, Miss Elizabeth, how about you give them your contact information?
Oh, there you go.
Some folks join by phone, so they won't be able to see the slides.
My name's Elizabeth Camp. My number is 682-202-2123. My email address is emcamplaw, emcamplaw@gmail.com. You can also contact Joy McNair. The phone number is 281-407-9830. And that's client services at mcnairlawgroup.com.
Okay, so we know that there was a lot of information for you guys. And again, I have tons of questions here for you that I need a little bit of clarification on, but we'll get to the questions at the end. I'd rather have Ms. Sharice to go ahead and kind of go into, once you've got all of this set up, you've already consulted with an attorney like Ms. Camp that'll help you with protecting your assets. What's the process now if you now need to actually apply for Medicare, Medicaid? Which one do you get when you're a senior, when you're not a senior? What do you do? Like, okay, now what?
Okay. Well, I'm going to share my screen here and take it from there. All right. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to pick up where Miss Camp left off, and we're going to continue with the extended care planning. And so I always like to kind of define for folks what extended care planning is, what we're talking about today. And that extended care planning is putting a plan in place in the event that you're going to need care later on. That plan, it could be for, you may just need some short-term care. It may be care that you need for a few years while you bounce back, or it can be care that you're going to need for the long-term care that you need for the rest of your life. So, when would somebody need care? When is a time when someone may need some extended care? It could be an accident. It could be an accident that happened out of the blue that caused you to need extended care, either for a short period of time or, depending on the severity of the accident, it may be long term. It could be something acute, like a heart attack or a stroke, that may cause us to need some sort of extended care at some point throughout our lives. And then we have age. As we age, what comes along with age is, frailty. We may become a fall risk. Those are times, believe it or not, when you may need some type of extended care. And then last but not least is cognitive, dementia, some form of Alzheimer's, even some forms of depression or head injuries are reasons to need extended care. So, what a lot of folks that I talk to when we talk about planning ahead and planning for extended care, a lot of folks think that the government already has a plan for us. I got Medicare. I got their red, white, and blue card. If something happens to me, Medicare is going to pay for my care. If I need to go to a facility to get care, if I choose not to get that care at home, we're just going to take my red, white, and blue card to the nursing home, or we're going to take my red, white, and blue card to the memory care facility to pay for it. Well, you guys, I have a surprise for you. Medicare, that red, white, and blue card that you may have if you're over 65 or if you're under 65 with a disability, does not pay for extended care or long-term care services. Medicare pays for skilled care. Medicare doesn't pay for that custodial care, that care that we may need if we choose to get care at home and we need help with what we call the activities of daily living, what we call, transferring, or when we get up in the morning and we may walk to the bathroom, or incontinence if we need help with our going to the restroom, dressing ourselves, feeding ourselves, help with hygiene, or even what we call standby assistance. Those are folks that may just be a fall risk. They have a hard time getting in and out of a vehicle, getting up and down out of a chair. Those are times when you feel like you're gonna need that care at home. Even if it's something cognitive, you may notice that mom isn't taking her medication when she's supposed to. She's taking her evening medication in the morning, and she's taking her morning medication in the evening. Or maybe she's taking too much of her medication because she forgot that she already took her medication this morning. These are times when we may need that extended care. These are folks that I've had experiences with when we believe, well, mom's on Medicare or dad's on Medicare, so Medicare is going to pay for that. But no, Medicare does not pay for long-term care services. So if we need that care at home, that's something that we're going to have to pay for ourselves, or we'll have to use Medicaid, that waiver program that Ms. Camp talked about, that can hopefully pay for us to get that care at home if we want to receive that care at home. If we feel like we need to receive that care in a facility, Medicare will only assist with skilled care in a nursing home for the first 100 days. Beyond that, you are fully responsible for that cost. And with a memory care facility or an assisted living facility, Medicare doesn't pay a dime. So now that we've established that the government is not going to pay for our care, let's further this conversation. Whether that care is going to be at home or whether we feel like that care may need to be in a facility, what I always like to have you ask yourselves is, if you don't plan for care, if you don't sit down with an attorney, Miss Camp, if you don't sit down with me and help with that insurance side of it, who's going to be affected the most? And I want you to take a minute and think about that. If you don't plan for care, who's going to be affected? It's going to be your family. It's going to be the people that you love. That's who's going to be affected first, the most, emotionally, physically, and financially. And let me give you some examples to help you to see what happens with our family, the ones who we love and who love us, and who are going to step up if we need care and we didn't plan for that extended care. Our children, our spouse, maybe a niece or a nephew who's going to step up because they love us. Who else is going to do it? So always love to give you guys some real life examples of how it affects your loved ones when we don't pre-plan. So I have one client that she's trying to take care of her mom. Right? She started off trying to take care of her mom. Her mom has dementia. Now she has a brother, but you guys kind of know how it goes, right? In the family, usually there's that one child that's going to step up. And then, the others, they may help here or there. Some may not help at all. I've seen that. But in this case, she is the primary caregiver for her mom. Before she had gotten and spoken with me, she'd been trying to take care of her mom for years with dementia, and it's constantly getting worse and worse. She's stressed because she hasn't had very much sleep. Her mom gets to the point where she gets violent at night. Her mom tries to leave the home. She has a lock on her mom's door. She's had to take off days from work. She doesn't have very many sick days left. And the reason why is because initially, when she started trying to take care of her mom, she would send her mom to an adult daycare so that she could work during the day. She sent her mom to one of the adult daycares that do specifically let those folks that may have dementia come in. Eventually, you guys, she ran out of money. She has run through her entire savings. She has run through her entire 401k trying to care for her mom. It has affected her mentally. It has affected her emotionally. She's an emotional wreck. Every time we would talk, I just listen to her cry. just cry as we tried to work our way through it and figure out a plan for her mom and how we were going to help get her some assistance. I just have to listen to her cry. She has no retirement left. She's going to have to work until. And that's because mom didn't pre-plan. Somebody had to step up. The person that she loved and the person that loved her was her daughter that chose to step up. Then I have a situation where I have a lady that is a spouse. She's the caregiver for her husband. Now he doesn't have any, he doesn't have dementia or anything like that, but he's a fall risk. He's gotten frail. He's not stable. He has fallen, you guys, 6 times, and he's broken a couple of ribs. She told me that she feels like a prisoner in her own home. She can't leave her home. She's scared. She doesn't want him to fall and hurt herself. She doesn't have any help from her children. It's just her. She can't even leave the house and go to the grocery store. I have another spouse that's trying to care for her husband, and now she's got to have surgery on her shoulder from trying to pick him up. He has a lot of, accidents. It's hard for her to change him and turn him over and, get him out of the chair, get him into the bed. And then last but not least, I have a daughter that's taking care of her mom, and she does have siblings. She lives in the same state, very close to her mom, and she does about 80% of the work, 80% of the care. She has a family also, had to put a promotion on hold because she has to be there for mom. And she feels a little bit of resentment because she has a sibling that lives out of state that will come down every now and again, and do a little bit of help. But they will try to provide a little bit too financially. And then she has another one that's out of the country that's just completely checked out of it. That resentment has begun to form against, her siblings and a little bit with mom because there was no pre-planning. So that's something that I always want folks to think about, because when we think about planning, a lot of times, we may think about, okay, well, the finances, and finances are most certainly affected, what it's going to do to me. But what about what happens to the ones that we love when we don't plan ahead? So what are some ways, in addition to what Ms. Camp talked about, that we can plan ahead? What are some planning strategies? When we talk about planning strategies, a lot of times we have to take into account, your health, the location of care, your finances, your goals. So when I'm sitting with folks, I always have to let them know that even if you've already been diagnosed with a condition, I sit with a lot of folks, or I get a lot of calls, more calls than not, of folks who have already been diagnosed, or it's really too late to do some of the planning that would have made things a lot easier and a lot less expensive, and they wouldn't have had to use services like Mrs. Camp to the extent that they need to now, had they not waited until there was a cognitive issue going on and whatnot. So many people call me after something has happened, and they just call and they're like, hey, I had one guy call and he's like, I'm sure there's nothing that you can do. My wife's already been diagnosed, but someone told me to give you a call anyway. So one thing I like to let folks know is, even if you or a family member has already been diagnosed with a condition, or as you saw from Mrs. Camp's presentation, even if you have a family member that may already be confined to a nursing home and that money is beginning to run out, there are strategies that are available for folks who have already been diagnosed. So let's talk a little bit about these strategies. So I know a lot of times folks think, oh, well, we're thinking about what I'm talking about, which is part of it is long-term care insurance, and others is just working with insurance carriers, or maybe even Medicaid, to make sure that you or the family member gets the care that you need. When we talk about long-term care insurance, I have a lot of folks say, oh, that's, hey, mom had that, and she never ended up needing it. She passed, she paid for it her whole life. The premiums went up every year. I don't want that. I don't even want to think about that. But you guys, things have changed so much over the years. And that long-term care insurance that you're thinking about, that is what we call that use it or lose it type of insurance. But now there are long-term care strategies that are available, that even if you don't use it, even if something happens and you die before you needed that extended care, then the money that you have put into that policy will go to your beneficiary. That money will stay in your family where it belongs, where you expected it to be after you pass. So it's you're still using the insurance carrier to hedge that risk, but if something happens, those funds that you invested into that policy will still go to your family. There are strategies available, like I mentioned before, for folks who may have already been diagnosed. If Medicaid planning isn't a good fit, then there are other strategies that are available too. If you've not been diagnosed, then and there are no major health issues, then that really opens up all a myriad of strategies that are available to plan ahead for that extended care. And so while I have you here for these last few minutes, I do want to talk a little bit about Medicare. Um, since Ms. Camp already kind of talked about Medicaid, we understand that with Medicaid is kind of income based. With Medicare, the way Medicare works is generally you're eligible for Medicare if you are either 65 or older and have worked and paid taxes for 10 years, or if you have a disability and have been receiving a Social Security income disability check, not just a Social Security income check, but a Social Security income disability check for at least 24 months. Once you reach that 24th month, then you're eligible for Medicare, even if you're under 65, or for those who may have had a disability from childhood, then they can get it through their parents and have Medicare under the age of 65. So that's when you're eligible for Medicare. But again, in this conversation, even if you have that Medicare, for what we're talking about right now, Medicare is not going to be very helpful to help with the extended care portion. If we need that extended care at home, that help around the house with, eating, with bathing, with help transferring and getting around, Medicare is not going to pay much for that. Medicare is not going to pay for that at all. But that doesn't mean that you won't need Medicare. So even if you have a family member that say may be in a nursing home or entering a nursing home, you go there, you take that red, white, and blue card, and they begin to tell you, oh no, you can't use this for the long-term care side of the facility. Don't think, oh, well, we don't need Medicare. Why are we paying for Part B? Why is mom paying for that? Let's drop it. You still want to hold on to your Medicare. You still want your family members to hold on to Medicare, because Medicare is still going to cover the cost or a portion of the cost, depending on if they have a Medicare Advantage plan, and that's getting into the weeds. But Medicare is still going to help cover a portion of the cost for physicians' visits. So you're still going to need it. Medicare is going to help cover a portion of the cost for prescriptions. And then Medicare will still help with other bells and whistles that are included too, that you or that family member will still need if you've already been confined to a facility. So you guys, I hope this information was helpful. I just wanted to piggyback on what Ms. Camp talked about today. If you guys have any questions, I'll just leave my information up here for a minute. I'll read it off. My name is Sharice Hurst. I help folks with the extended care crisis planning. So for folks who have already been diagnosed and think that there's nothing left that you can do, I help you with planning for that, and also with asset protection, even if you've already been diagnosed. And if you haven't, working along with attorneys like Mrs. Kim, structure your assets so that they are protected in the event that something may happen. My phone number is 832-312-7052. My email address is churst, CHURST, at echoefc.com. My website is echofc.com. So Nia, I'll turn it back over to you.
And I want to jump in and say, oh my gosh, if y'all could have seen me, I was back here in the peanut gallery going, yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much, Ms. Hurst. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I'm trying to get your contact information too and stick it in the chat. So I'll put it in the chat in just a second. So I'm going to go back up. I'll get to everybody else's questions before I get to mine, Miss Elizabeth. So I don't want to hog the conversation here. Okay, question. Well, there's a couple of questions in one box here. self-dealing statutory. When a person has dual medical power of attorney and power of attorney, why is it a conflict of interest to be a paid provider for that person in Texas?
Oh, it's not that it's a conflict. It's just that Medicaid doesn't permit it. So there's a program where you have people who are disabled when they're young, and their parents can provide care to them, but the same thing does not work for people who are 65 and older. So Medicaid even lists specific things that you cannot pay a family member for. And I mean taking them to doctor's appointments, mowing the lawn, laundry. Medicaid specifically says, nope, family should be doing that for free. So the only way to do that, to actually get paid to care for a family member, is to be a licensed provider yourself and go through the provider that is providing their Medicaid services. So let's say they're on Star Plus waiver and you are a certified nurse assistant licensed, then you would have to get a job through the Star Plus waiver provider. It's difficult.
Another question here. Affidavit of death on a transfer on death deed. Is it a form? Yes, it is a form.
Mhm.
And we actually do have a copy of it. So I will be emailing that to you guys along with a copy of the transfer on death deed packet. However, I did include in the chat the link to the transfer on death deed toolkit. And I know inside that toolkit, there is a copy of an affidavit of death form that's in there. And it has the instructions and everything on how to complete a TOD and where you go to file it and all that information. In addition to that, Neighborhood Recovery also hosts periodically transfer on death deed clinics where we actually have attorneys to come in and kind of review documents and have it notarized for free and provide you with the kits and everything like that, so that all you got to do is really just go down there and file it. So be on the lookout for our next one. We just had one back in October, but we were trying to plan one again for the next few weeks, but I'm still working on that. All right. Who is really keeping up with the spending under the Medicaid recovery is the private company. Who is the private company that's keeping up?
Oh, the name of the company is HMS, and it's hang on, I can look at that real quick. And they're it is a giant company, HMS Holdings.
Who is that?
So
Wow.
what goes on with that is that instead of the state of Texas themselves having, somebody from the AG's office file the claims in probate cases, it's this private company that they've contracted out to.
Okay. How would one prove what is truly owed when you don't get a record of spending? Most providers don't send bills.
Oh, Medicaid actually will tell you the amount.
So it's not like
remember,
so
there's
it's not like it's a statement that they give you every month or at the end of
no,
the year to tell you what's been
no.
spent or anything like that.
So if the person's been on Medicaid, and remember there's a difference between Medicaid and Medicare. If the person who has been on Medicaid, they are going to get a notice from HMS for Medicaid estate recovery, and it will tell you the amount owed. And then that it also often comes up when somebody's passed away, they've been on Medicaid, family didn't even think about it, and they go to sell the house. And the real estate agent says, hey, did you know that there's a claim for $180,000 from Medicaid? That's when you call us. That's when you call us to handle the probate and deal with the claim.
So when you've got someone that has a will that's been on Medicaid, they've been in nursing home, and the executor for the estate is charged with selling the property. So now that they have to sell the property, there is no distribution to the heirs once the property is sold because they have the MERP attached to the property now, right?
No, we deal with the Merck claim before any distributions are made, so the claim is over and taken care of, and then the heirs can decide if they want it deeded or if they want to sell it for cash. So we clear that during the probate process before any distributions are made.
Gotcha. And most people, well, they won't even know most times then if there is a claim that's out there
No, they
when
don't know until they go to sell the house.
until they go to
That's when
sell.
they find out.
Oh, Jesus. Okay. So can anyone
But
basically
as
qualify?
you can imagine, it's worth it's worth talking to an attorney about it.
uh, can anyone basically qualify for Medicaid?
For long-term care Medicaid, as long as your income is below the cost of care and your resources, your accountable resources are under the resource limit, sure, sure. Um, because it's so expensive. I mean, I'm working on an application now for someone who has a long-term care policy, but we still have to get her on Medicaid. And Sharice is like Sharice knows these old long-term care policies that pay $110 a day just do not go far enough.
So do you have to update those kind of policies? You said the long-term care policies that only pay 100 some odd dollars when you said that.
Yeah, these are old long-term care policies that people have that they purchased years and years ago.
Oh, so how often should you update those if you do have a long-term care policy?
Um, I don't know that a lot of people will update them. They're
Yeah,
very
so
tough. That's Sharice can speak to that for sure.
yeah, you can't update like an existing long-term care policy. You can choose to try to get another long-term care policy if you qualify your underwriting. You have to go through underwriting and look at your health. But
But by then, by
they
the
don't
time,
typically update those old ones. They don't, there's no like update to those
but
policies.
but by the time you need it, you've got some kind of medical condition now that's gonna disqualify you from actually getting another one.
I know
Exactly.
you're
And
So
that's
yes,
catch 22.
yes.
wow.
Yeah.
So if I bought one or had one from 20 years ago and I still won't need it for another 10 years, it basically it's not going to cover not even half, potentially, not even half of
Yes,
what my needs are.
you are correct.
Yeah, those
Wow.
older ones, they don't have like the newer ones account for inflation. You can put
Mhm.
inflation riders on it and all that, but those older ones didn't have any of that.
Mm, 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 mm. All
No,
right.
I'm literally working on one right now.
Yeah.
You
And,
touched on trans.
and I don't know how much she paid into that. No idea.
Probably a crazy amount.
Yep.
Yeah.
You touched on transfer on death deed and ladybird deed. What exactly? And I know, but if you can explain the difference of the transfer on death deed versus the ladybird deed.
Okay. So a transfer on death deed and a ladybird deed both accomplish the same thing, which is transferring the property to your beneficiaries after your death without going through probate. The difference between the two, the transfer on death deed is a creation of the legislature of the state of Texas. The ladybird deed was created by an attorney in Florida, I think, but we use them in Texas, and it's not named for Lady Bird Johnson. Um, but both of them, you continue to have all the rights in your property during your lifetime, and you can sell it, you can revoke the deed, you can go rent a bulldozer and bulldoze your house if you feel like it. Um, but when you die, that property is automatically transferred. The big difference between the two, to me, is that a transfer on death deed has a 2-year statute of limitations on it. And that is for final expenses. So if you had a bunch of hospital bills after you died and they weren't paid, there is a 2-year statute of limitations that someone could come back against that property. And that there is none of that with the Lady Bird deed.
Oh, I didn't know that. So much of that stuff I didn't. And we have these workshops. We talk about wills and estate planning, and things like that on a monthly basis. The first Thursday of each month, we have a whole presentation with Lone Star Legal Aid. And that's not one of the things that they say.
Yeah. If Joy were listening, Joy has specific situations that she likes to use TODDs. She's probably working on something right now.
Okay. Let's see. The majority of the time, it's a
There
desert.
she is. Joy, can you hear me?
I've been summoned. Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing well. I've been enjoying the presentation and all the information that's been shared.
Would you like to introduce yourself officially?
Oh yes, hi. I'm Joy McNair. I am estate planning and elder law attorney. I own the McNair Law Group, and Elizabeth has been a counsel to our law firm for a few years now. We've been working together, and we've got have a great relationship. And she's definitely a Medicaid expert. So I think the question was specifically the transfer on death deeds versus the
Yes.
ladybird deeds.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Ladybird deeds, in addition to what Elizabeth explained, they can only be signed. I don't know if you mentioned that. Ladybird deeds can be signed by power of attorney, as an agent under power of attorney, whereas a transfer on death deed cannot. So if an individual is incapacitated, a transfer on death deed is not even an option. And so that's kind of a big distinguishing whether the person has capacity to sign or if it's an agent signing. Did you
Well,
mention that already, Elizabeth?
I did not. Thank you
Okay.
very much. It's why I knew there was something I was forgetting.
That's the big distinguisher for me is the person's capacity, ability to sign. A transfer on death deed must be recorded before a person passes away. A ladybird deed doesn't necessarily have that same requirement. It's better, but it doesn't have to be. So if a person, maybe not in a Medicaid context, but if a person's critically ill and we want to go ahead and implement a deed to try to avoid, we'll probably do the ladybird deed if we're not confident that we can get it recorded before the person transitions. So that's another big distinguisher as well.
so there's no delay or how because doesn't a transfer on death deed have to be on file for a period of time or something before it becomes effective?
The 2 year,
What was that, Elizabeth?
the 2 years.
Are the transfer on death deed, or are we
Yeah,
talking about
the
the
the Todd,
affidavit?
both. So the Todd does the Todd have to be on file for a period before it's actually goes into effect?
So a Todd, you mean after the person passes away and the title transfers? Is that what you're
So
saying?
so if I do one today and I
Mhm,
pass away in 2 days,
mhm.
is the transfer on death deed in effect?
I've done that where the person passed away within 2 or 3 days. I mean, the Todd is basically just a beneficiary designation.
Okay.
And so as long as it's been recorded, we've not experienced any issues with title companies in that context.
Okay. So and then with the ladybird deed, there is no period of time that it has to be on file somewhere or whatever before a person transfers or transitions either?
Technically, I mean, it's always better for a deed to have been recorded, but as a ladybird deed is just a warranty deed, and the warranty deeds under in Texas at least don't necessarily have to be recorded prior to one's passing. I think that's also why they make a distinguish on top of the Todd, because that is a difference than other deeds. Again, it's best practice to do that, but sometimes people just it's done less now, but back in the day, for some reason, people just didn't record deeds, and then they've found them later whenever they're administering the estate. You have to check books and check all kinds of things, and all of these records surface, and they were able to do that. But now, like I said, it's best practice. But As far as the time on recording, that's not been my experience that has to be a certain time frame.
Okay. Follow-up comment regarding the power of attorney, medical power of attorney not being able to be paid. The family member is on the star waiver and total assist. This type of need should not be the responsibility of a single family member. This rule or policy should be changed. Not sure when it was created.
Can I speak on that too?
Boy, do
Please,
I
I know
agree.
I'm not, I know I'm a guest here, but one thing to that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's kind of a public policy. Texas is of the position that children should take care of their parents. It's not necessarily a something that should be done for compensation. I'm in agreement that that law should be changed, but that's kind of the public policy behind that. I'm going to be quiet now.
No, that's helpful. I mean, that's great information too.
It's extremely irritating, to put it mildly.
Hmm. Another question here. How do lottery winnings, for example, maybe $1,000 or something of that sort, affect Medicaid eligibility?
They will ask, they will ask about income received. So if you are on Medicaid and you are playing lotto and you win $1,000, the way it works is the money is income in the month that you receive it. And it is a resource afterwards. So if you get that $1,000 in and you don't spend it, that's going to go towards your $2,000. You can see that it would easily put you over the top. So if you get like $1,000 or something, spend it. If you won like $10,000 and you're in a nursing home, you're going to have to private pay the nursing home that month, and you're going to have to figure out what to do with the rest of the money. So that's when I would call a lawyer. And I've also had to be very clear with people because I've had people want to raise money via a GoFundMe for my fee. So we've had to be very particular about this is not income to the person. This is what, so I have to remind people if you're GoFundMeing, you better be very, very careful about it because you do not want Social Security or Medicaid to count that as income to the beneficiary.
What about like insurance settlements or other inheritances? Are those still considered income as well?
Correct. Same thing, same
Uh,
problem. So if somebody has an inheritance come in when they're on Medicaid, call an elder law attorney and it can be handled.
And then what happens like if you've got because I'm a licensed realtor too, and then I had one of my clients that actually was in the process of selling her home because she was older in age, she was falling, needed to move in with her child. So, and that's when I ended up calling Miss Lisa to help them out. That her house was paid for, so she was just going to sell, and now she was going to receive this lump sum of cash. So if somebody is that of that age and then they sell their property, what do they need to do or take into consideration before they start just selling off property for that reason to move in with a child?
Yeah, they would probably do well to consult with an elder law attorney because they may want to hold off on selling the house because the house doesn't count as a resource for Medicaid. But once you sell the house, you've just created
Cash.
money where now it counts and it didn't before. It can be handled and there are things you can do. But you have to be very, very careful about it. Even when it comes to buying another house with the funds and how
Hmm.
you do that. There's a brand new Texas Supreme Court case about that.
Wow. 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 Okay. Da, 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 da. Regarding the HMS Holding, the private company that keeps up with the MERP, can you get record of spending before the person dies?
I don't know. I never asked you. I suppose you may be able to ask Medicaid or HMS.
Okay. I had a question about the revocable trust. When I saw it on that list of different types of trust that you can
Mhm.
create, and it says something about losing homestead exemption. So once a person creates a revocable living trust and they put their home into the trust, they lose their homestead exemption.
No, 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 no. It's not anything to do with the homestead exemption. It's that if you are applying for Medicaid and your homestead is in a revocable living trust, it counts as a resource because it's in the revocable living trust. If it was not in the revocable living trust, it wouldn't count. So it has nothing to do with the homestead exemption. It's just whether it counts as a resource for Medicaid or not.
Okay, so under the revocable living trust here, you've got homestead must be removed from trust prior to applying for Medicaid.
Yes, because when the homestead is in the revocable living trust and you're applying for Medicaid, the value of that home counts against you for Medicaid. Once you pull it out of the trust and deed it back to yourself, it no longer counts.
Here's a
Resources are
plan.
divided into countable and non-countable, and you can change the nature of them. And actually, Ms. Hurst knows very well about changing from countable to non-countable Medicaid compliant annuities. So, yeah.
Go ahead, Sharice. Were you going to add?
I know I was going to add it. I was just agreeing with her.
Yeah, there are certain annuities that Medicaid, if you put your money in them, Medicaid won't count those as a resource. And that's one of the things we use when we give money away to qualify for Medicaid. It
Okay.
is there are so many moving parts. If I start veering off, I'm really gonna blow everybody's minds. It's very complicated.
Yeah, we don't want to get into that much detail. I mean, it's bad enough that we're trying to kind of compartmentalize and keep all
Right.
this on track. Like, okay, she said this, do this. Talk to an attorney. Stop
It
it.
really is like that.
For the folks that are watching this presentation, we beg of you to pay it forward and pass it along to other people that do not have this information. It does us no good to keep it to ourselves. We have to provide or give this information to as many people as we possibly can, because it's almost impossible for somebody to really keep up with all of this and these moving parts and try to figure out, okay, we got to do this and we got to put this here, but then move this and then put it back. And then it's a lot. That is a
Mhm.
lot for somebody to have to try to keep up with. There was a question. Let me go back up just a little bit. Thank you for the information on public policy regarding a family or child member not being paid. How does one become a licensed provider? Um, total assist. A total assist at a level 4 should be paid. Not sure what that means. Ms. Foreman, you want to unmute yourself and kind of give a little bit of clarity on that part?
Yes, it's the type of care. It's the type of intensive care that you have to do. My mom is total assist, so that means everything has to be done for her.
Um,
Yeah, yeah, a level 4 care, and so you don't have any training. It's hands-on training as you go. So just a lot of support that you don't get with trying to keep this person in the community, keep this person in the least restricted environment. Um, and I can tell you that if uh, she had been placed in a nursing home facility, she wouldn't have lasted this long. She will tell you that herself. Other people
sure.
would tell her for the type of care. And with the stats out there saying what happens to the caregiver, and I imagine those stats are based on more so people that do not have this type of intensive care, not to take anything from the ones that they're overseeing, is what I call those people are able to get up and do stuff, but they have to be monitored and so forth. So I know public policy cannot be changed overnight. It is what it is. But I'm like, where in the world did this come from when it was created? Because you have more people that are living longer, and these people are normally not taken care of at home. So you had something created where they can be taken care of home, but we don't have the resources and tools. And then it is expected for you to be able to do this for free. Now, I'm not the person to say that I'm begging to get paid, but some type of resources need to be able to come back in to replenish so that this workhorse will be able to survive the journey as well.
Yeah,
You are
mentally,
so correct.
mentally, financially, physically, emotionally, yes, absolutely correct.
And our Texas, and I try to explain this to everyone because it upsets everyone when they find out about it, that we just, and I guess our nursing home lobby is so strong, but we do not have things set up for Texans to age in place.
Hmm. So, in other words, for those folks that are thinking that I can get paid to take care of my mother, my father, or whomever, stop listening to the street committee and get the correct information that you need to make sure, it's not just automatic and it's not something that you can just decide to go and sign up for and then that just be that. It doesn't quite work that way. So just to be aware. Um, She says, I've heard, please, please, please plan ahead. Absolutely. I've heard several presentations on today's topics, and it has been most informative. So thank you very much, Ms. Foreman. I did have another question. When you talked about the crisis planning, and you gave the scenario of a person that, just kind of has a stroke or something like that, and then a spouse, taking care of them or being able to qualify for Medicaid
Mhm.
because of the stroke. Is that an age restriction there too, or is that regardless of whatever age? Because you've got like single parents that are taking care of kids and then they stroke and then, what I mean, or become suddenly incapacitated, car accident, whatever. Are they eligible for Medicaid then too at that point?
Oh,
Or
for
is
nursing care Medicaid?
yeah,
Absolutely. So
okay.
if you're 25 and you get in a car wreck and that's it, yep, you can get on long-term care Medicaid too. You just have to be disabled. That's all there is.
And that's when you get with somebody like Sharice to help you with trying to apply for it and figure out what you got to do.
At this point, if you're that bad, you're not, you
Right.
don't have any capacity.
Mm.
You'd probably have the person's parents, if they're really young, talking to Sharice and trying to figure out what to do. But yeah, I've done Medicaid for people in their 30s and 40s.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that people got the gist that it wasn't just for somebody 65 and
No,
older.
if
Okay,
you need to be in a nursing home, if you need skilled nursing care, period, it's there for you.
gotcha. All right. Well, we kind of going over all of my questions that I had as I was listening here, or you guys were talking. So I think that's it. I don't have any other questions in my comment section here or on social media. Are there any other questions for any of the participants that are joining us today? If you guys have any kind of questions or comments or anything, and while someone may be typing or wanting to unmute themselves, I want to thank you guys, wholeheartedly thank you guys for providing this information to the community and keeping us updated and informed about what exactly is it that we need to do, and knowing that there are other levels or other steps other than just here you need an estate plan and create one. These are the documents. Okay, but outside of that, there's another layer, and then another layer, and then another layer that nobody knows about. So we've been doing our partnerships with the A Month of Service Collaboration and the other attorneys since 2017, something, or 2018, somewhere around there. And this level of explanation about elder law is so much more, you know, in detail that we don't get in those other presentations. So there's so much more to it than just filling out these documents and then just kind of going on about your
Right.
business. There's more. Wow. I'm excited to even try to tell people, like, listen to this, do this, hard, you know, to get does Medicaid get flagged when someone wins any lottery amount?
Oh, Medicaid has your bank account number and they search by social security number. I know. I had somebody ask me once, well, what if I open a bank account in a really small town? Sorry.
They're the Gestapo. They find everything.
Yeah.
I think when even Social Security does too. I think when I think my dad's one of his when my dad passed a few years back, and I think his Social Security payment was supposed to hit his bank account like within 2 days after he passed or something like that.
They're fast.
And it deposited and went back out the same day, like literally the same
Yeah.
day. I'm like, how in the world did y'all know? Not that I was, you know, could even have access to get it, but when I got his bank statement, I'm like, how in the world did they know just that fast? So they are the Gestapo. They find everything.
It's the funeral home.
Oh, see, they were mad at me because I didn't give them the insurance information. That's what it was.
You know, the funeral home notifies Social Security,
Oh goodness. All right.
which is
Well,
nice. Say that you don't have to, you know.
yeah, it's helpful. So this is helpful in the sense too of people mentally being prepared for this kind of process or this kind of transition. Because if you don't know any of this stuff in advance, it's so easy to get in a situation where you're flustered and frustrated and angry and overworked and overwhelmed trying to figure it out and then trying to learn at the same time, you know, trying to implement it and learn it at the same time. That's even more frustrating. So thank y'all very, very much. Really appreciate you. Miss Joy, thank you also for tuning in and sitting in and giving your expertise as well. So Miss Sharice, Miss Elizabeth, thank you guys very much. On behalf of Neighborhood Recovery, we welcome you guys to come back and join us for other presentations that we have throughout the year. We are in the process of planning for 2025, so be on the lookout for our schedule of other activities and things to come. There should be a link that pops up at the end of the Zoom. If you guys could take a moment to fill out the survey for us and kind of give us your input and let us know what it is that you other information that you may need that you may find beneficial or that's of importance to people in your community or your family, and let us know so that we can, you know, make arrangements to provide and present to you guys. So thank you for supporting and continuing to come back and join us. We really appreciate you. You all have a wonderful remainder of your afternoon. Have a wonderful and safe holiday. Take care of yourself. Matter of fact, holiday is a perfect time to have this conversation about all of this stuff. You guys just learn, just kind of throw it out there on the table and let the conversation flow. And by the way, watch this video if y'all want to see it. So I'm going to send you guys a link um, of the recording to go back and watch, a link for the YouTube channel so that you guys can share it and pass along to other people. I also will be sending out the link of the information about the Ladybird deed and the transfer on death deed toolkit that has the affidavit of death in there. So, you know, you guys will have at least a little bit of information to kind of get you guys started on whatever process that you need. I'll also include the contact information for each of our presenters too, for you guys to reach out if you find yourselves in need of any specifics assistance. So again, thank y'all very much. Y'all have a wonderful remainder of your day.
Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.